Hello and welcome to the Jason Eldridge Photo Show. In this video, I interview Sarah Mathews about astrophotography. Well, hello Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing quite well. So I can already tell everybody watching that this is going to be a very different show from what I'm used to, or from what you're used to, because everything that I normally talk about is all related to nature photography. And while I guess technically this is nature photography, it is very different. I started getting into astrophotography and I came across Sarah's YouTube channel and I've been emailing her back and forth. I wanted her on the show almost immediately. I love her sense of humor and just her presence on the screen. It's awesome. So Sarah, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So tell everyone who you are, how you got where you are, what's your connection to astrophotography, astronomy, astrophysics, all of that stuff.
You got it. All right. I will try to distill this down. Yes, my name is Sarah. At least that's what I've been told. And I come from Colorado, also what I've been told. And yeah, my path into astrophotography, I don't know, I mean, there wasn't one significant point in time where I was like, I'm going to be an astrophotographer. I mean, maybe there was, but it was mostly like, I've just always loved space. I've always been a very deeply philosophical person, very existential, even from like a young age of like 3 or 4, just like wondering what it means to be human. You know, just like, what is all this? Just what is it, all this? What does it mean to be human? And I think as I've grown up, space is really, while like the science of it is just absolutely fantastic, and I am a huge nerd in that capacity, I think for me, space is like this kind of amalgamation of a lot of the human existential questions that I've always had. Because so much of what we don't know is, out there, and even in quantum mechanics, of course, too, but like, space is just, like kind of like this physical manifestation of a lot of the questions that I have. And so for me with astrophotography, I started dabbling in 2019. I was never a serious photographer in any other types. I've, dabbled with just, like my phone and such throughout the years. But it was probably around 2019 where I was like, I really like this. And so I was just like kind of pointing my camera, up at the sky, just, taking a photo of some stars. Yeah. And I probably got like really serious about it in 2022. But up until then I was like just learning as much as I could. And I don't know when I would actually say I became an astrophotographer, because it's just been this ongoing evolution. Okay. So that's a little bit my background. And I have a YouTube channel. A lot of what I do is just focusing on educating others. I think you learn a lot about a subject by teaching others, but I also just genuinely enjoy like teaching others and just helping other people like reach their potential, because I don't know, there's just the human connection is also like really huge for me too. Oh, nice.
Yeah, the astrophotography, when I first started looking into it, I'm like, oh, I've been a photographer forever. I'll jump right in and it'll be easy transition. And that's why I ended up finding your YouTube channel, is because I was like, oh my goodness, I have no idea what's going on. I have no clue. And so I was looking for someone, there's Civi, the lazy geek, but I think half the time when he's talking, I have no idea what he's talking about. So I was very glad to find your channel in that you were able to convey it in a way that I could understand it. And so I can see from your YouTube presence that you enjoy doing what you do. And that's one of the main reasons I reached out to you. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it means a lot. I've learned from so many like greats out there. So it means a lot.
So what made you decide, all right, I've taken some nice photos with my phone and now I want to step it up a little bit. So was it just the results you were getting from your phone were so compelling that you just decided to take that extra step?
Yeah, great question. So I should have mentioned this before. I used to work in the space industry. Like one of my mentors there he was an astrophotographer, and he showed me this image of Thor's helmet, which is a planetary nebula. And he's like, yeah, I shot this in downtown, like Manhattan, or I guess Manhattan infers downtown. But I was like, in Manhattan? And he's like, yeah. And he introduced me like to narrowband filters, which for anybody who doesn't know what that is or what they are, they're basically filters that you put in between your camera lens or your telescope and your camera, which allow only certain wavelengths of light to pass through. So light that is coming from like a light pollution source, like a street lamp, isn't really going to get through. So you can image some of these targets out in space, like this nebula, pretty well. And I was just like floored. I was like, what? And from there, I just kind of dove in, and I wanted more because I was like taking pictures with like my camera, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But my natural tendency tends to be like, oh, I really like that. I'm going to go a full send and go all the way. Yeah, and I think I'm like very just overly optimistic with everything in my life. So I think that's where I was just like, you know what, I'll just figure it out as I go. And that's basically it. Okay.
Then I'm a lot like that too. It's like if I have an interest, I'll start reading, and then from that point on, it just explodes. I'll buy everything. I'll try to spread it out over time, but I mean, you can see This is just since March. I started putting all this stuff together, and I'll just get the mount because the mount's so important. And now I'll get this, and now there's these sales, and here we are. So
yep,
it hasn't got to see anything yet, but hopefully tomorrow night I might be able to get it out and at least get it focused, if nothing else. So I was very happy to learn about narrowband filters though, because living in West Palm, we have a Bortle 7, I think is where I live, is in a Bortle 7, but I have access to a spot that's a Bortle 4 about half an hour away, so that's not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it. I got all the gear, and I was just like, you know what? And that's why when I say like I started in 2019, I was like, and I didn't really get serious until 2022, because I spent a good deal of time just being like, what is all of this really? Yeah. In the background of things. So yeah, I totally get it. And you're super far ahead. I've just been very impressed with just like seemingly how easy it's been. You've just been like, oh, I get this and this. And I'm like, you already have auto guiding set up, and which we can talk about later, but very cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. No, I'm obsessive compulsive, and not clinically obsessive compulsive, but I have tendencies toward that. And my wife always makes fun of me because she's like, well, I'll see you reading, and then I'll see you watching all the YouTube channels, and then I'll know stuff is going to start showing up at the front door. So
she's perceptive.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I was actually surprised to hear that it's just been so recent that you got into it, because I see your images, I see the way that you talk on YouTube. Your channel is amazing. But the way you deliver it, the animations, all of that detailed information, it's spectacular, actually. And then to hear that you've only been doing that photography part of it since 2019, that's pretty surprising, and serious since 2022. So that means you've come a long way pretty fast, though, because your images are nothing to sneeze at. So. Oh,
thanks. Yeah, just that whole kind of obsessiveness, I think, helps or hurts, but. Yeah, you're always just like wanting to get better, I think, and like I really always just want to understanding whether it's a human or something technical or just anything. Like I just am passionate about understanding, and I think that's been a big driver.
Oh, that's excellent. So there's a lot of people there's not a lot of people that watch my YouTube channel, but I'm hoping to get a few more. But most everything I talk about is terrestrial photography. And now we're talking about something that I thought was going to be similar, but it is not at all. So if you have someone that's a terrestrial photographer that kind of wants to see, okay, maybe I want to try astrophotography, what would you recommend them do to begin with, rather than just immediately go to that?
Yes, yeah. I would say, it is surprising, I think, to a lot of folks that if you are a terrestrial photographer, you already have so much of what you already need, because, and it depends on the type of astrophotography, like your subject matter, but truly like a DSLR, a DSLR or mirrorless camera, and any range of focal length lenses, prime or zoom, will do the trick with a tripod. I mean, you just basically the things what you're accounting for, you're shooting at night, of course, but and you have the rotation of the earth to account for. But I think if you already have that background of understanding the exposure triangle, understanding what focal length is, what field of view is, I mean, you're already like light years ahead. So I think folks that are just starting off, just use what you have, truly, and you can go exceptionally far.
That's great. Later this year, I'm doing back-to-back workshops in Joshua Tree National Park. We're going primarily to do night photography, and we did have some people asking about star trackers, and they're pretty green at the night photography, so we were not recommending that they bring the star trackers for this. But even if you don't have a star tracker or anything like that, you can absolutely get involved in astrophotography just by going out and the settings. If you're a terrestrial photographer, it's easy to look up to what settings you need. And you can go out and point it at that little fuzzy spot in the sky and take a picture in the middle of summer, and you will be floored by what you see. What the camera can see that you can't. And if you're lucky enough to be in a dark sky like Joshua Tree, then you'll be able to see that Milky Way even with the unaided eye, or just without your camera, you'll be able to see it. And so it's spectacular. So chances are you already have what you need to kind of dip your toe into it. But if you wanted to go a little further, you're going to have to do the research in star tracking and accounting for the rotation of the Earth and that sort of thing. But use what you got already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's very exciting. You're doing some workshops out there, and just taking short enough exposures, just like with a bird in flight, right? Like if you're used to doing wilderness photography, you have to balance the exposure triangle depending on a lot of different variables. But like if you understand that you have to balance those things, and sometimes you have to prioritize one element of it over the other, you bring those principles in. It's just kind of like, going from one job to the other. It's like, what are those fundamental skills, those transferable skills? And I think, like you said beautifully, you already have those things. That's really exciting.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about astrophotography, use what you got, get started, and then start looking at this kind of stuff. So for me, it's exciting. I've always been a gearhead. So this is really, really heavy gear oriented stuff. So if you like gear, this is a great place to take your photography. And like I said, I was a little bit tongue-in-cheek with the nothing applies, but I don't think that's necessarily true. As a terrestrial photographer, there are things like, we call it ISO, they call it gain usually, depending on the camera. There's a lot of stuff, the focal lengths are fixed, so you know what you got when you're going into it. Whether you're using your cooled camera or dedicated camera or your DSLR or mirrorless camera, you know the focal length. It's all about getting the right focus and then working on your exposure times. And like you said, trying to balance how much noise am I okay with in the photo to be able to get the shot that I want to get. If you're a terrestrial photographer, you can absolutely do it. Just understand that there is a significant learning curve when you're getting into this. And there are lots of cords, lots and lots of cords.
Yes.
They're everywhere.
Yep. Yes. They will become your best friend, and you just learn to live symbiotically. And, oftentimes if something goes awry, it's probably just because you need a new cord. But
yeah, you need a new cord, or you've got it on your tripod and it's pulled your stuff apart. Yeah, all kinds of...
Which has never happened to me. Just kidding. It's happened a lot. But I'm not.
Well, I had mine set up, and I'm like, I'm gonna rotate stuff around and see how it's good. I won't hit anything. And I was like, oh, look at that! I can absolutely destroy stuff. That's great.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
Go in here.
Yeah. Yep.
Get my. So we've talked about it a little bit, but if you're brand new to it, what kind of skies are we looking for to get the best images that we can get?
Yeah, great question too. So, just like with other forms of like photography, like terrestrial photography, You might be really into wildlife. You might be into landscape or a lot of different things, but I think it comes down to what you're interested in. So for example, if you're interested in photographing the moon or the planets, for example, light pollution isn't really that big of an issue. That's something you don't really have to contend with. What you have to worry about if you're at very high focal lengths with those types of targets is just having stable skies. But if you're wanting to photograph fainter things, things that like the Orion Nebula, which is a very popular subject for beginners because it's so bright, less light polluted is generally better, but like we were kind of talking about earlier, you can use certain types of filters, like narrowband filters for some of these targets, and your skies don't necessarily matter as much. But yeah, like it's just like going out under the stars and seeing, the Milky Way for the first time. Dark skies are always great because they're just so beautiful. But it's really just what it is you want to photograph, and, can you get away with just using a filter, for example? Hopefully that's like kind of a decent answer, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because once again, when I first started thinking about it, I was like, well, I'm here in West Palm Beach in that Bortle 7. And just for everybody's reference, there's a scale, I think it's from Bortle 1 to Bortle 10. 1 being the best skies you can get, and 10 being like downtown Manhattan, New York, or Tokyo, for example. And so you immediately think, well, if I live in a Bortle 7, I'll never be able to get a decent photograph. What chances I have? So now I'm having to travel if I'm ever wanting to image anything. And so when I learned about the narrow band and understanding that I can do it here, and so if you think that you're limited because you live in a city, you may not be as limited as you think. But like Sarah said, you've got planets, which I have not tried to image at all, which seems funny to me because I do the little astronomy tools thing, and I'm like, all right, what is it? Yep, Mars, I think, is right there in the middle. It's very
it's
tiny.
Like baby.
Yeah, it turns out it's far away. But anyway, you can find a way in polluted skies to be able to take those photographs. I do not have a narrowband filter yet. It should be here next week. I was hoping to get it before tomorrow, but that's just not the way it worked out. But I'm hoping to give it a go. Now, trees and that kind of stuff, that's a different story. You really can't filter the trees out, from my understanding.
Not yet. Not yet. Same with clouds,
I'm looking for that cloud filter that's supposed to be coming out, right?
I used some clippers last weekend to trim my treetop, and it gave me about an hour of sky. And I was like, there you go. That's my, because I never would ever cut down a tree, but I'm like, I'll prune it, but yeah, trees or buildings, those are still pretty dense.
So I wanted to, so basically what we're talking about, you don't need dark skies, but you can't replace dark skies either. The filters are nice, but if you're in a Bortle 1, 2, or 3, enjoy yourself, because that's exceedingly rare these days. So, yes. And I think it's just going to get worse, unfortunately. I know there's a lot of groups out there that are working to try to bring awareness to the fact that there's light pollution, but man, there's a lot of people that don't even think about it. So
yeah.
All right. So this is a question that I've had since I started looking at astrophotography, and that is, I talk a lot about vision on my channel, and the idea is that vision is what an individual brings to the table when you're talking about photography. So I am who I am, and that has given me a vision. Whether you recognize it or not, you have a vision when you're looking at your images. Now, some people like to follow rules or guidelines, but I've moved quite a ways away from that. And now with my terrestrial photography, I just try to make images that I love, and I don't worry about the rules. I don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. So when I started looking at astrophotography, there are a lot of very smart people in astrophotography, and they love when they produce and post their images, they love to tell you all the details about how many hours and how many sessions and what kind of equipment that they used. But I never see or hear anybody really talk about their vision for what they were going after. And in the night sky, Orion Nebula, we'll use that one as an example, or the Rosette, it's always the Rosette Nebula. It's always the Orion Nebula. It doesn't change. As far as we're concerned, it doesn't change. So what can you do as an astrophotographer to convey your own vision when you're taking a picture of something that is always the same?
Yeah, it's an excellent point because, what we perceive as dynamic is, like you said, it is dynamic, but at a different scale, right? I mean, the sun is probably the most dynamic subject that we have that we can actually see because it's always changing, hour to hour, minute to minute. That's a beautifully dynamic target to be able to photograph. But in terms of being able to have a vision like, depth of field in the traditional sense, unless you're including some sort of landscape, that's going to be much different. So if it's just the Orion Nebula, to your question, I think it's like, imagine photographing, you're like on a workshop, you're like teaching a workshop, or you're on a workshop and everyone's photographing the same mountain, for example, with the same kind of wide angle lens. And, that's not a bad thing that everyone has, like they're photographing the same mountain with the same kind of wide angle lens. But one thing that you can do is like use a telephoto lens, like constrain yourself to using a telephoto lens and just photograph, the tip of the mountain. You lose context in some ways, but it does give you a different perspective. Similarly, I know you mentioned the rules and such, and I think rules are nice for a starting place for lots of folks, just to kind of learn like some setting points or whatever. Like a good lead line is a good lead line, even in astrophotography. Using gas, that looks good from a certain angle coming from the, side of the image, that's great, or framing up some stars. Composition can still be part of your image. You just have to think about it in the same way, but also a little bit differently. So I like to play around with focal fields of view. So that telescope you have behind you, the ASCAR V, I think gives you a lot of that opportunity to change your field of view. Because like you said earlier, most of the telescopes are very fixed in terms of focal length and focal ratio. You know what you're going to get in the beginning. But having that opportunity to kind of have some choice with your focal length is huge, I think. But also, the types of gases that you're photographing or the types of dust. So for example, you can go to these websites, like there's a website called telescopius.com or .net, and you can use surveys of the night sky. So if you wanted to look at hydrogen alpha emission lines, which hydrogen alpha is one of the most abundant resources in the universe, and most of these large nebulae that we're talking about are composed of them. And so you can look at these sky surveys and you can basically start to plan your composition. You can use certain filters to bring out those things ahead of time that maybe somebody else isn't bringing out. And what's something that I really love is the post-processing. Processing in astrophotography is very, very hands-on, not only from the pre-processing side of it, when I say that, I mean, we take calibration frames like darks and biases to try to, minimize that noise. When we're stacking our exposures, we try to use flats to kind of correct for vignetting. But even after that, trying to take an image from a linear state where it's mostly just dark and bringing it into the light, which just that whole transition in and of itself gives you a lot of creative opportunity when you're stretching an image. But then also how you combine certain data, like for example, I could take just pure HA data from a target and then pure 803, and the way that you blend them together and what you bring out and decide to not bring out, you really tell a story. Like I love to use like kind of different combinations of what is called pixel math to blend data where maybe it's not as common or is not. It's still common, but it's not as visible in the way that I'm kind of bringing it out. So you have a lot of artistic expression in processing. And that's something for me that I'm really passionate about, is processing. And then, people will tell you about the rules and be like, you have to be very scientific and like what it looks like in the visible spectrum. But like the visible spectrum is like this small compared to like the actual electromagnetic spectrum. So I'm always like, whatever. It's always up to you. But that's my vision. Right. That was a very big question, but answer is
no, I think you're spot on absolutely with everything that I've been learning. I opened up PixInsight and nearly went cross-eyed because it's so vastly different, but I see all of the options that you have. And not only, you mentioned it too, the filters, is because you can choose to be a monochrome camera and choose to do your reds, greens, and blues, and you bring out to the H alpha and the O3, and then you can choose when you're doing your post-processing what of those colors and the specific wavelengths of light that you want to accentuate. And I think that gives you a huge amount of leeway in how you want the image to look in the end. Not only the colors, but also the composition that we talked about. Just because you see all of the Orion Nebula doesn't mean you have to photograph the whole nebula every time. You know, you can zoom in the trapezium, the part in the middle that's bright, it's got those 4 stars. It looks amazing. There's no reason why you have to always have that wide angle. So you can go deep into it. You can find little vignettes. In landscape photography, I always call it vignettes. So my 100 to 400 is probably my favorite landscape lens, because I like the idea of being able to reach in and find those little vignettes of detail that you miss if you look at the whole thing. So cool. I love that about being able to do that in astrophotography too. It's just not quite as easy to zoom in astrophotography as it is otherwise, because you've got to zoom in, you've got to change everything, which has actually been one of the harder parts for me, is trying to decide what's the best field of view, and it turns out there's not an answer. There is no best field of view.
Yeah, you're totally spot on.
Yeah, it's just what field of view do you want tonight? That's what you have to ask.
Pretty much, yeah. And just, yeah, like building out these, like, just when people ask me like, oh, what is the best setup? And I'm like, oh man, it depends on so many factors. I'm like, you know, I'm just like, yeah. But you know what? It's cool because I like constraints. Constraints give you so much room for flexibility, like so much room for creativity. So I've learned to just lean into constraints because there's a lot of opportunity, which sounds like ironic, but it's true.
Yeah, that's so expand on that a little bit. Let me try to understand what you mean by leaning into the constraints.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just like if budget is your constraint, which unless you're like a monarch or something, like we all have constraints. Yeah, I'm certainly not. You know, I think being able to get the best out of your gear, for example, like, you know, something like this, like being able to know, like pushing something to like its limits, like what can I really get out of something like a mirrorless camera and a lens, before I upgrade, for example, like working within those constraints is like, you learn so much about so many other things. And I think you become more creative in terms of like how you problem solve, how good you get at processing. Also being constrained by, you know, if you know, I guess you only have this field of view, like you have to imagine, how am I going to compose this the way that I want? Or maybe I want to, I don't know, because I'm so constrained with a field of view, maybe I start to create what's called like a mosaic. I'm not sure if mosaics are as popular, like just creating like an image that has a lot more resolution by taking, I guess, segments and then, that's another way.
We call them panoramas for terrestrial, so. Panorama,
okay, yeah. So when I mean creative, it's, you know, yes, it's in the artistic sense, but it's also like in the technical sense, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's regular terrestrial photography has a tendency to get technical sometimes, but it's got nothing on astrophotography. And when you mentioned mosaic, and I was able to put the correlation between panoramic photography, where you take multiple images and you stitch them together, and you can do vertical, horizontal, you can do all kinds of things to get a big, massive image if you want. My brain just shut down when you mentioned mosaics for astrophotography, because I think it's going to take a lot of effort just to get one shot of one thing that I'm going to like. And I can't imagine now thinking of multiple shots of the same thing to be able to stitch together, where to do it and how to do it. And now I'm lost again. So thank you very much for that.
Sorry. I'm just like, here, go back into the deep end. But you know what? The ASIR, you can actually plan your mosaic ahead of time, which is really cool. Yeah. It's that's I think one of the cool features about the ASIR, which for folks who don't know what that is, it's just like a little mini PC, Wi-Fi mini PC computer that you attach to your telescope setup, and it will let you run all of your things. And you can literally plan to get like, okay, I'm going to get 5 hours on this segment, 5 hours on this segment of the same part of the night sky, and then you just bring them into post. And anyways, that's amazing. How you can use constraints.
Okay, yeah, we were talking before I hit the record button about how I used to live in East Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains, and that's where I fell in love with photography and nature photography. And I moved down to the Everglades, and the Everglades are very, very different than the Great Smoky Mountains. Whereas in the Smoky Mountains, you could point your camera in hundreds of directions and get amazing photographs, even if you don't know what you're doing, because it's such a great, wonderful location. But in the Everglades, it was very constraining, to use your term there. And you have to lean into that constraint. And I became a much better photographer because of the Everglades and the constraint that I had there, and having to go out and really look and work to find that composition. So I think you're absolutely dead on. If you can only afford a basic DSLR camera and a lens and a tripod, that's your constraint. But that doesn't limit you in your creativity. It might limit you in the subjects that you can photograph, but it doesn't limit you in your ability to learn or make incredible photographs of what you can photograph. So that's excellent.
Completely agree.
All right, let me get my trusty sheet of paper here. I would put it up here, but it blinds me. Oh yeah, that was okay. So if you are new and you've been taking pictures with your DSLR and your mirrorless, and you're enjoying yourself, and you think maybe I want to take a next step, what would be the first thing you would recommend to someone brand new that has DSLR stuff that says, I want to start getting more into this? What would be the first thing you'd recommend?
I would recommend starting to take just multiple short exposures of the same subject, testing your field of view to see at what point do I start to get star trails, and dialing that back in your shutter speed until you don't get star trails or visibly enough that you're okay with. And then just start taking lots of those photos and, just maneuvering your camera to reposition that target in the field of view. And then, maybe capture like an hour and then take those images and then run them through, if you have Photoshop. I mean, I know Photoshop isn't always the most popular. Lightroom I know is much more popular, but if you have Photoshop, or if you have we can get into Serial and other free platforms later, but you can just load those files into some sort of script that will align those images, and you will get more signal to noise. And I think just getting comfortable with the concept of what's more signal and less noise is, and I know that is still something that is like in terrestrial photography as well, but I think getting comfortable with stacking. And then if you wanted to go up the next level, using like a nice star tracker like this. But yeah, that's kind of my next 2-level plan, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, so just use what you got. I like the idea of getting into the stacking part of it, because that was brand new. In terrestrial, I do a lot of stacking, but it's called focus stacking, so that your images are sharp from the front all the way to the back. And it's not terribly difficult to do that. But in astrophotography, they like to name things that are very different than what the rest of us are used to. So it took me a little while to understand. They call it weighted batch post-processing? Is that what they call it? WBPP?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. What? Just use words I understand.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than just getting a bunch of acronyms thrown at you or a bunch of words, and you're just like, yeah, there's like, in what context have I ever heard this? And you're like, yeah, never. Same. I'm just like, I don't know what weighted batch this stuff comes from like so many other fields that sometimes aren't even related, and you're just getting this confluence of different fields coming together, and it can be a lot.
No, so I think if you're a terrestrial photographer and you already have, most of the time you have ranges anywhere from 14 to 400 is kind of your average ranges that people have. So if you have a 14 millimeter lens, you've already got the lens you need to really do amazing Milky Way photography or star trails, or point it at the North Star and find some foreground subject and watch those stars spin, and you can stack those in Photoshop pretty easy too and get those star trails that you want. So there's a lot that you can do, and if you have a 100 to 400, learn a little bit about the night sky and rack it out to 400, get you a star tracker, and learn how to polar align and how to get it to start following the stars, and start doing longer exposures than you can normally do. Do 30 seconds, do 20 seconds, whatever you can, and you'll be shocked, absolutely shocked at what comes out. And the fact that it seems kind of boring, because I always say you set it all up, you hit a button, and then you do nothing for 3 or 4 hours while it does its little track across. But then you get 40 images that when you stack them together, you will be floored. And that's what hooked me. I got out, years ago I got a telescope, and it's a Evolution 8 from Celestron, and it's great. I got it for visual. My kid was somewhat interested in it, so naturally I used that as an excuse to buy something expensive. So I bought it and started using it, but being the photographer that I am, I immediately said, how do I attach a camera to it? And so that started down that, and I had a few successes when I lived in Homestead, but when I got up here, I decided to go out and try it again, and I pointed at the Orion Nebula, took maybe 30 shots over a night, and came home and worked it through PixInsight, and my goodness, I absolutely fell in love with it. So that's why I ended up with all this other stuff, because it's pretty cool when you stack all those things together and you get something that you didn't expect. So that's awesome. So you've got it, you've already got it. If you're a photographer, you've got stuff to get started, and then look at star trackers first, I would think, because you don't have to, well, I assume that they have star trackers that can have go-to features, but you're probably getting more into mounts then. But I needed a go-to feature. I've always liked the night sky, but if I had to try to find a little bitty spot, it'd be a struggle. I can find the Orion Nebula. That one I can find. So
yeah, the whole go-to thing, same. I was just like, look,
it's cheating.
There's a lot of you out there. There's a lot of you out there, and I'm already impaired, So yeah, with my vision. So I was just like, okay, yeah. That's one of the cool things about having a go-to mount, is that it will teach you about the night sky. It'll
yes.
Where do you want to go? And you can just traverse anywhere, which is really beautiful, because in what other realm do you get to just point something? I want to go to the Vega star, and you get to, and I'm like, wow, that is so cool. You learn so much about the night sky, and people are like, oh, you're cheating. I'm like, no, you just get a first-class teacher to be like, oh, away, this way. That's what I think of it as. I'm like,
that's
thank
right.
you. So,
the good news is unless something is terribly, terribly wrong, once you learn where the Orion Nebula is, it's going to be there the next time you look in the same spot.
Most times. Yes. Yeah. No. And that's what's so cool. It's just and then you learn about the rhythm of the seasons, and you're just like, wow, if I ever got lost somewhere, I could figure it out. It's super cool, because the night sky is just it's our first compass. It really was. And, it's just a really cool thing. And even if you don't have go-to, you can always use a planetarium app like Stellarium, which is what I constantly use. And you do learn about the constellations, the popular asterisms like the Big Dipper. And I think it's just, like anything, once you understand the principles of something like stacking, polar alignment, which is where you align the polar axis of a equatorial mount to the pole star, or the polar, where in the sky the Earth appears to rotate on its axis. Once you kind of understand these concepts, even at a fundamental level, it just really starts to build and build and build. And then you see those images stacked, and you're like, whoa. For me, it was just seeing the Orion Nebula, one single sub on a 135 millimeter telephoto lens. And I was it was just one sub on the back of my camera. And I was done. I was like, how can this thing that's out there 1,000 plus light years away, which is an unfathomable amount to begin with. I don't even, what does that mean? I can't even. But I saw it and I was just like, it was almost like a spiritual experience being like, wow, like this light that's like so far is like on the back of my camera. It's just like such a beautiful sense of just place in space. It was really cool. And then, yeah, you stack them together. And if you're an overachiever like yourself, with your high dynamic range skills, I was like, what is this? Most times I'm like, my first Orion was like so blown out. I didn't even realize it was blown out until I learned what high dynamic range even was. And yours was just like so beautiful. I was just like, wow. See, just a testament. If you were already a photographer, you're already way further than I was.
Yeah, in terrestrial, we always say, for us, it's watch your blinkies, or in a histogram, watch everything to the right. Make sure you don't clip anything. So that's all I did with Orion is I took a picture and I'm like, okay, well, there's my histogram. I've got stuff that's to the right, so I want to make sure that I don't lose that data. And I had to brighten it up a good bit in post-processing, but I did it selectively so that I left the middle like that. So I'm looking forward to trying a different camera out and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very excited. And finding your YouTube channel definitely helped with that. So
Good.
Speaking of that, where can everybody find out more about you?
Yes, you can find out more about me on my website, sarahmaths.com. Now, I'm not a mathematician, it's just a shorthand for my last name. I'm also not British. People think I'm British because of that, so I'm misleading. Sorry. But you can find me on Instagram, sarahmaths.astro. My handle is pretty much the same across the board. Yeah, feel free to reach out. You can email me. I try to respond to emails as quickly as I can. Sometimes it just depends on, the other things that are going on in life, but I always try to respond. So feel free to reach out.
And you've got a Patreon too, right?
Yes, yeah, I have a Patreon, and I like to just share other content over there that, I'm like, should I make this into a video? But this is still like really, I think, helpful information. I usually share it over there, and hopefully eventually having a Discord, but it's in the works. So yeah, Patreon as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Sarah, let me check my notes here. Put it right up here in front so everybody can. Yeah. Yep. So I think that's going to bring us to the end of the interview, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talking about this. And for those watching, there's a lot of things that were said, like flats and darks and bias frames, and I'm mostly in the know now of what those means and what those represent. But don't let the lingo, the jargon, the stuff that astrophotographers are used to saying all the time, don't let that dissuade you in any way, shape, or form. You can absolutely learn it, because the people that don't know photography that hear you talk have no idea what you're talking about. So it's okay. If you're interested in astrophotography, you can learn it. I promise you can learn it. So just stick to it and let me know what you think about this episode, and if you're interested in being an astrophotographer. And definitely check out Sarah's channel on YouTube and her website. Join her Patreon if you can at all. If you can donate, I know that every little bit helps. So by all means, go do that. And Sarah, thank you very much for giving us your time tonight and talking us through this.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful, and I also learned so much too. So it's just great. I really appreciate being part of it.
Excellent. So I'm going to end this the way that I always do, which is grab your camera, get off the couch, escape, explore, and create.